Welcome to this edition of Rattling the Bars. I'm Manson Moose, co-host with Eddie Conway. Today, we have a remarkable individual here to talk about not only what evil look like, but how evil impact people's lives. We have Lacino Hamilton. He was exonerated in 2020 of a crime that he did not commit. This is when I'm talking about the evil. When we talk about a person that was convicted of a crime that he didn't commit, served over 2 decades in prison, and later to be exonerated. But like the phoenix that rises from the ashes, Lacino Hamilton has risen from the ashes. Welcome to Rattling the Bars, Luciano.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Lacino Hamilton. I'm 47 years old. I was born and raised in Detroit. Became a part of the foster system as a baby. My mother had me when she was about 13 years old. She was a part of the system. So I became a part of the system as a baby. Raised in the foster system, man. About 10, 11 years old, I became a runaway. Bounced in between my foster home and the streets. The foster care system, I think, is a completely broken system here, at least in Michigan. But at 19 years old, I was arrested for a crime that I did not commit. The police framed me. I like to say that it wasn't just a result of the jury got it wrong. Police officers manufactured a witness by giving him information to say, and he repeated it in court, information that the prosecutor would later go on to ask the jury, how would this man know these things that he's testifying to if Lacino didn't tell him? Unknowing this to the jury is that the police provided him with the information. I was 19 when I was incarcerated. Emotionally and psychologically, it was probably one of the hardest blows because the person I was being accused of or framed for killing was my foster mother of 15 years. Went into prison. I was lucky to run into some older men, part of a Black nationalist organization called the Milanics, who kind of nursed me back to health. I was a pitiful sight. Like I say, emotionally and psychologically, I've been just tore down through that charge and trial and conviction process. And these men slowly began to help me get back on my feet, primarily through self-education, giving me the tools to self-educate with, offer me some other perspectives to understand not only my incarceration, but my place here in the American society. And through writing thousands of letters and articles and different things that brought some attention to myself, the Wayne County Conviction Integrity Unit and the Cooley Law School here in Michigan. It was a new program. It happened to be new funding. And, I've been a person fighting my case for over 25 years at that time. And once they got my case, there was evidence that had never been disclosed to myself, to my attorneys, or never just disclosed through that entire 26-year, almost 27-year process. And once that evidence was taken a look at, as you said, I was exonerated September 30th, 2020. My 2-year anniversary is approaching soon. And I was released and finally back out here able to contribute not only to righting wrongs that's similar to happen to me, but just in our society in general. There's a lot of inequalities and things that are just flat out wrong.
Right. And let's pick up on that. Exonerated after serving close to 3 decades in prison. And congratulations, your anniversary is in September. Mine I'll be out 3 years in December. I was locked up 48 years. I'm not claiming innocent. I'm just claiming being Black and in trouble. That's what I'm claiming.
Yes, sir. When early in my prison sentence, like I say, some of these men who mentored me when I came to prison have been in prison like 25 or 30 years. And having the benefit of their experiences kind of condensed and given to me They were telling me don't have faith in the criminal justice system. And they began to expose me to some of the raw, you know how they say numbers don't lie? It was something here in Michigan, like 90% of the people who go through our first court, which is said to be the court where you have your best shot at, routinely receive no action.
Right.
And as you move up the appeals process, those numbers get closer to 100% of people who basically, they just showed me that the system didn't work.
Right.
And they put me on the process of saying that I was going to need some sort of outside help, you know. So I began early in my apprentice sentence writing law schools, journalist schools, lawyers, innocent projects, you know, just anybody who I thought may listen to my story.
Right.
One of those men also exposed me to some information, some academic information on behavior modification units, which is another name for solitary confinement.
That's right.
And this information, I've been in prison a couple years. I was starting what would be a 4-year stint in solitary confinement. The information sort of blew my mind that people were articulating the harms that they knew that this environment caused. You know, some government bodies like the United Nations act in solitary confinement onto torture, you know, sensory deprivation, right? But it was through this process that when I read this information, I began to make prison a study of mine. One of the men told me that the best way to defend myself against these harms that they know are calculated into this prison system was to get all the information I possibly could about it so that I would be armed to have some sort of defense. And that's what I did. I began to study prison on a more academic level, from sociologists, criminologists, I know there's a lot of science and discipline that goes to making up this environment. Having did that, I was introduced to a woman named Maya Shinwer, who was writing a book about her sister's experience in prison. Maya Shinwer is the executive editor of Truth Out.
Okay.
It was through my introduction to her that she encouraged me to write an article for Truth Out, which was published. And that sort of opened me up to being published by different people. So the only thing I've ever done with Truth Out is publish articles.
Okay.
But they were so instrumental in my release. It was that exposure to a larger audience, people becoming aware of who I was and my story, which allowed me to acquire some help from different parts of the country. Colorado, New York.
Right.
You know, so that was my relationship with Truth Out.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarity, right? But in terms of your and we applaud you on your self-development and your ability to like overcome your circumstances. I much like yourself, in my entire time being locked up, I did the whole gambit, Supermax, lockup, Supermax, you know. So that comes with the territory. And
yes, sir.
And your observation of prison, the prison industrial complex is no more than the new plantation. This is our belief. Our belief is that prisoners are the new form of chattel. Just like you had sugar was the product, and tobacco and cotton was the product in the 1800s. In the 20th century, 21st century is people. Human beings are the chattel. But let's talk about this article that you wrote, the gentrification from I think you said gentrification to prison pipeline.
Yes, sir.
And I'm you know, everybody hear the term gentrification, and when the corporate America that's primarily responsible for the gentrification of communities, because oftentimes corporations, Clark Construction, or one of the major construction companies get the contract and start demolishing communities and build apartment complexes that the average income had to be somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 before you can afford a one bedroom. Now, we know that Detroit was called the Motor City. And that Detroit was considered at one point in time with the auto industry, it was a vibrant economic town. With the closing of the major industries led to exodus of people leaving. More importantly, if they didn't leave, they was forced out. You made this observation in y'all. Talk about why did you go in this direction? Why did you take, this is a unique perspective in that you are actually saying what this is premeditated when you take and displace people, but the premeditation is predicated on, I want this area because the people in this area can ultimately become chattel in the plantation. Talk about that.
I've been reading a lot actually about the prison to school pipeline and how there was a connection between the public school systems, how they're custodial in nature, and how they sort of feed the prison system. I grew up in the neighborhood in Detroit, 7 Mile and Hoover area, nicknamed the Red Zone here in Detroit. It looks like a war zone. Our neighborhood literally has blocks and blocks of houses that used to be there, they're gone. So where there used to be, houses on both sides of the street, there are no houses, or there may be one house or a house that the roof is missing and the side of it's gone. The entire neighborhood looks like that. Well, somebody had asked the question, where did all of those people go? Because, these were neighborhoods with families and children, and what happened to the people that lived there? And the person that asked me that, we had sort of looked around the prison day room that we had been in at the time and realized that a lot of our friends who we grew up with were also here in prison. And somebody said, hey, they're all in prison. And we began to think about that a lot more, how that process sort of happened. So for an example, in the early, they used to have a place in Detroit called the Cass Corridor. It's been nicknamed Midtown. Midtown is where we have like 4 for professional sports arenas there now, right? Football, baseball, hockey, basketball. It's been completely redeveloped. Like the people who were there historically, the people who came in, as you said, to work the factories, they were gone. But around this time, people were being sent to prison for like drug paraphernalia. They were given 1 to 10 years. Certain areas are targeted. Certain times, like the federal government will come in and start policing an area, arresting and charging, because they have laws that will allow them to give more time for the exact same offense that you may be charged with through the state. Mm-hmm. So we got to talking about this process and how it happened. There was an effort you could see to come in and arrest people, give them time for things that, like I say, for drug paraphernalia. A person could get caught with a utensil used to smoke crack and give a 2 to 20-year sentence. And we just began to notice the process that all the people that we grew up with were in prison. And as we were going to prison, the same places that we used to live were deteriorating through some form of social neglect. Right. Or, like I said, being developed, and the people who were there were not allowed to be there anymore for just several reasons.
Right. And, and when you describe your neighborhood, I'm in Washington, D.C. area, and I oftentimes go to Baltimore. And what you said, if you went through Baltimore City, you would actually think that you in Detroit, because on some streets, it might be 30 houses on the street. Out of the 30 houses might be maybe 10 families occupying. And that might be between abandonment, 1 head, 5 abandonment. So what that does is it destroys any sense of community the 5 families that lived there had. But more importantly, I think you spot on when you talk about how everybody that was in them neighborhoods winded up. The children wind up in prison, and the families more than likely was given a voucher to go into an area that they would not be able to maintain the income, the rent. And so therefore they wind up like even being homeless. But talk about once you made this observation, and what did you do besides writing? What was the next thing? What was the next step? Because I think it says this is a series of articles that was written on the subject matter.
So it wasn't a series on that particular subject matter. Like I said, my relationship with Truth Out and some of my perspectives on the criminal justice system just allowed me to write and get published a lot of different articles surrounding criminal justice, poor people, oppressed people. So it wasn't a series on that particular article. At the time that I was incarcerated, I was kind of, the thing that sort of motivated me to write is I kept saying people can't know these things, right? That's the thing that kind of motivated me. I'm in prison. It was difficult, excuse me, for me to be active. Even in prisoners are active, always starting groups to do things to try to reconnect with the community or do something to educate. It was difficult for me to do anything in prison because I spent, as you said, as your own experiences, a lot of time either in solitary confinement, maximum security prison, or on some security threat group status. So my contributions at that time were primarily through my journalism, trying to make as many people aware, hoping that people that were in better positions that I was in at the time could weigh in on this subject and do something about it.
Let me ask you this, because that's an interesting observation. By your own admission, you went at an early age, young age, and like all of us that go in the prison system at an early age, we're basically functionally illiterate. We're not literate because the environment that we're in don't call for us to be literate. We're in an environment that's, like you say, is a lot of degradation, a lot of oppression, but more importantly, the subculture that we involve ourselves in, it don't call for us to have a nice understanding of the English language that make our subject verbs agree. We use a lot of slang. So when you came, how much education did you have when you came into the prison system?
When I went to the 12th grade, I ended up getting a GED. So I had a GED, I had a general education, the GED before I came to prison. But you said early on, I was encouraged to write. So I'm trying to write, and I was amazed to discover that I couldn't put a grammatically correct sentence together. And I tell people I was an A and B student. So I sometimes wonder, what level they was grading me on and what did those grades actually mean? Because like you said, I was really functionally illiterate. It wasn't until I began to self-educate myself that I learned just how uninformed and how uneducated I was and how useless I found my education, because it was really of no use to me. It didn't teach me anything about how the world works and why, or how certain things have things like the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, how those things may have an impact on my life, or causes of, and it's like we got Labor Day coming up. And I wonder how much people know about labor struggles and how much that will be celebrated. The strikes in the plants, working for an 8-day hour. It's a lot of things that people may hear, but don't know much about what went into it and how important they are. And I knew none of these things. And it was, like I say, difficult for me to have any type of positive contribution on something I was completely ignorant about. And my lack of contribution was actually, in a way, a form of contribution. Not doing something is contributing to a problem too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what? And like Comrade George Jackson, he said that when he came into at a point during his imprisonment, when he got to the point where he started raising his conscience, he said he identified the prisoners that was in there, that was there before him, that had a consciousness about their environment, and they seen prison for what it was. They seen the system for what it was. And they educated him, and their whole goal was to turn the Black criminal mentality into a revolutionary mentality. And from your own observation, you spoke on how older inmates, or lack of better, or older prisoners rather, how older prisoners took you up under their wing and started giving you information, relevant information, help raise your conscience. Are you still in touch with these individuals to this day, or do y'all have a relationship?
Some of them, I was in prison 27 years. I was transferred a lot.
Right.
They had something in Michigan called systematic transfers, where prisoners who they thought were influential, they would constantly move me. I guess so I couldn't educate other men, right? So I'm saying that to say that I'm not in contact with every gentleman that I met throughout the years, but my number is a well-known number in the Michigan prison system. And no matter what I'm doing, when I see that 972 area code pop up, I accept it.
Right,
so I stay in
right.
communication with as many people as I can, because there's a lot of men in there that have a similar situation as mine, men and women who've been in there 50 years. Well, let me say this, I'm an abolitionist. So
Right.
I don't have a qualification per se for who I believe should be out of prison. I
Right.
believe every man, woman, and child that is currently incarcerated should be released today.
Right.
I just want to put that out there. So, but yeah, I stay in contact with as many of those men as I can. I'm grateful for, like I said, they had an accumulated knowledge that they shared with me. The things that took them 30 years to learn, a lot of that I was exposed to, so I didn't have to make some mistakes. Some of the observations, these men were so intelligent that a lot of the things that they said I took for face value. And I began to search immediately off of what they said. So contact with those men was invaluable, because I didn't have to go through, they say bumping your head is the best teacher. Maybe sometimes,
Yeah.
right? But some of the things I read in these books, that men and women, I don't have to bump my head. Some of the things, it brings me up to speed immediately and puts me in a position where I can immediately begin to do something to change my situation or circumstances or reality in general.
Let me ask you this, and we're going to be doing this at some point in time. We're going to be examining the innocence of people that's in prison, trying to really raise the conscience of our viewers and society at large about this evil that take place when a person is stripped of their freedom and don't have no way to get no redress other than, like what you say, constantly like trying to get somebody to take note of. And that's in and of itself. How'd you hold on? How'd you hold on to staying focused and not succumb to the depression, man? Because I know this is a reality that I'm innocent and ain't nobody trying to hit me out. And I'm here in this crazy environment and I ain't supposed to be here. And every time I say something, somebody like looking at me like I'm crazy. This in and of itself is trauma. How did you manage to navigate through that traumatic experience in that environment and deal with the trauma upon being released? How have you been able to deal with that?
I mean, it was a common. First, I want to say that I have a assortment of residual effects of prison, right? Like when most people interact with me, I'm able to articulate myself or socially interact, but I have dreams. There are things that bring back memories, like the re-trauma of it. So now I'm going through the legal process of trying to address this, to be compensated, but it's to constantly, I could be having a good day. I go see my lawyers and I get to talking about this and I start crying. And nothing about me I was having a great day, but sometimes we live in that trauma. But having said that, there was a combination of things. One, I was a part of a group, a Black nationalist group in there that was well respected in the Michigan prison system. And because of that, I tell you, I did 27 years in prison. I never got in a fight. I never stabbed anybody. None of the things that people sometimes associate with stereotypes, right? So being a part of a group that was well respected impacted my prison system a lot. One of them was through self-education. the more I learned, as I admitted, as I alluded to earlier, I was able to build up a defense against the trauma, for lack of a better term, because I was aware of what was happening to me. And having the benefit of academic studies, what the sociologists say or the criminologists, it was giving me an insight into prison that was allowing me to say, these are some of the things that you may want to do or stay away from. Having said that, one of the things I did is I held on to my anger, right? A lot of people would say that anger is corrosive or whatever, but I was angry, right, about my situation, and I wanted to do something about it. And what my anger led me to do was to educate. The only way I could do something about it was to know something about it, was to have an understanding about it. So my anger kept me in a book. My anger kept me writing. I was dissatisfied with what I was experiencing. Anger, so for whatever people may say about some of these emotions that people sometimes make you feel like you're a bad person for having these emotions, I always felt I had a right to be angry about what I was going through, and I channeled that anger into books and writing. And there were a lot of people, I met people along the way who supported me, wonderful people. Dr. Dorothy B. Farden of Boyd State, she ran a Sojourner Truth prison network where she created a prison letter and allowed us to write and write freely. She was my first and one of my staunchest supporters. Claudia Whitman of Denver, she started out fighting for death row prisoners. She met a man here in prison by the name of Danny Burton, who was also innocent, later exonerated after 30-some years, and kind of led her in the direction of innocence. The list goes on. Roots Act, New York. It was people who supported me as well, who believed in me, who reassured me. Sometimes when you fight in isolation, even if you can write, you can begin to doubt yourself. So it was a combination of things, through some of my own efforts, but a lot of people that I met along the way who assisted me in the critical areas, who made it possible that I could self-educate.
And what? And not to cut you off, but in that regard right there, that's the part of the prison industrial complex that no matter what they do, they can't destroy that spirit of determination. The host of this show, Eddie Conway, a former Black Panther, he was set up because of his politics and did almost 40 years. But to go back to your point, it was him that got me to be where I'm at, because it was him mentoring me and educating me, much like yourself, much like your own story. And that's the story of the prison industrial complex that goes unnoticed, is that it within this environment, and Angela Davis talked about it, If They Come in the Morning, about the camaraderie that we have for each other in this environment of this degradation and this dehumanization, that out of it comes a commonality that we have to work together to make sure that we survive.
Once again, quickly, I was speaking with a guy. I went to an event about a week or two ago, and the comment, product of my environment, came up. And often when we hear this comment, it's sort of a justification for why I'm fucked up, right? I'm just a product of this. And I stood up to say that Huey P. Newton was a product of his environment. Harriet Tubman was a product of her environment, Eddie Conway. And I went there to say that oppression also breeds resistance.
That's right.
Right? So sort of what you're saying, that these oppressive conditions, they were products of it. Anytime people are being oppressed or people being pushed to the wall, someone is going to be pushed back.
Right.
That is a product of that environment. Mentoring people, self-education, self-determination, because the environment forces you that, because those things are being stripped away from you in ways that are harmful. So it's natural in self-care and caring for others that there will be people to, like you say, to mentor, to educate, to stress the importance of having a self-determined attitude and perspective on life. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, hey, but talk, and very well put, bro, because I like I said, I applaud you, and I know what you've been through, and I understand that because I went through the same thing, and I was in an environment with people that were actually innocent and did 30 and 35 years and grew up in the prison system. And like they was like a voice in the wilderness. But talk about, give our audience a view of how when you finally got the news that the criminal injustice system had to reckon with their setting you up and had to let you go. Can you give our audience what it felt like to be able to say that finally, I'm out of here and I don't have to worry about dealing with this insanity no more and can go on to do greater things?
I just want to back up quickly. I'm an anti-capitalist as well, right?
Yes, sir.
And I say that because the capitalist system, as we are taught, is a competitive system. It's supposedly designed to keep people at their best. You always got to be at your best. But one thing that's never said about competitive systems is that cheating is a element that you can't get out of it. And one thing I always ask people is that anything that you know is competitive, people cheat. Cars, football, dice. There's nothing that we know of in life where people compete. It could be charades. Somebody got to talk and open their mouth, right? And somebody gonna tell them stop cheating. Well, the criminal justice system is also a system like that. It's a competitive system. It's about wins and loses. And because it's predicated upon competitive values, cheating is an integral part of it. And this is the reason why I'm anti-capitalist. It's one thing to create a system where someone cheats. It's different to create a system where cheating is an element of it. And when we're talking about cheating, we're talking about food, clothes, healthcare. Some of the most essential things in life are based upon that competition. I don't want a system where I can't get cheating out of it. It's one thing I like to say for people to cheat, but I don't want a system where this is a fundamental element of the system. Having said that, when there were all sort of fingerprints, DNA evidence that was just completely hidden and never given to us, when these things were first discovered, I was asked would I like them to be tested, of course, right? It was tasked to the Michigan State Police because the Detroit crime lab, where I'm from, had been closed down because of just flat out lying. That's right. There's no other way to say it. They were just lying about their findings, right? So the Michigan State Police was tasked with testing the evidence the scientific evidence that they found. It took a year. I couldn't understand why, after being incarcerated 26 years, it would take so long for something to be tested. When it came back, the Michigan State Police conclusions were that it could possibly be mine. My mind is blue. I'm telling my attorneys who had my case 7 years pro bono that I haven't been lying to you. This evidence is not that something has to be wrong. Either they're lying or they're incorrect. Just so happened the Cooley Law School had been given a grant. And because they were given a grant, they matched funds with my lawyers who had been taking this case pro bono. And we had the benefit of one of the leading experts in the country to retest the evidence. And the courts took his word over the Michigan State Police. I just want to add these things. It was a real struggle because it's about wins and loses. They're still trying to win, right? They're still trying to hold on to a win, right? So the cheating comes out because winning is the key thing in a competitive system. So having said that, to be honest with you, when I was finally released, there were men and women who I had met throughout my prison system, some free, some who had been formerly incarcerated, who came to visit me that first day out. When everybody was gone and I was finally by myself, I stretched across the bed like this and I smile. And there's a movie that came out in the 80s called The Last Dragon. The star was Bruce Leroy. You know, there was a moment in there he kind of realized his power and he began to glow. That's how I felt. I felt like pure electricity was running through my body. I tell people for almost my entire prison system, for 14 to 18 hours each day, I was on a typewriter, I was in a book. You know, I always believed that I was going to write myself out of prison, meaning that I was going to somehow acquire some help from the outside world. I felt so elated that all of that effort, as you said, navigating through prison. This is an environment, once again, where everything is limited. And when we talk about that competitiveness, everything is limited purposely, and there's a struggle in there for the most basic necessities of life.
That's right.
You know, simple things. And to have navigated through that, I mean, just all the things I had to do to have to line up. Like I say, never get in a fight. You know, never really having to interact in that, right? I just felt elated. I just can't, like I said, I felt like pure electricity was running through my body. But on the flip side, I felt lost. You know, when I came out, there were few things to remind me of the world that I knew, even people, because most of the men and women that I knew at age, when I left, we were all children. These were people who had been in their adult lives, fathers, mothers, grandparents, they had careers, experiences. You know, it was things that sometimes people may not understand. So for an example, I found it difficult going on Facebook when I first came out. You know, I was eager to go on here and see what this person did or what that person did. But often when I would go on their pages and see their lives, their weddings, their vacations, their children, their birthday celebrations, once again, it was something that I couldn't emotionally handle because it was a reality of what I had missed out on. You know, I had a friend who was very shy growing up. I knew her from like the second grade on to when I was 19. She was shy that I could remember. And I went on her page and seen how vibrant she was, right? And to see what she had flowered into. And it would be things like that to say, like, what could I have become?
Right,
you know,
right.
So it's been good and bad, right? And I'm just being honest with you. You know, some people may not want to admit.
Oh no, believe this here. That's a reality. I told you I did 48, and when they let me out, I was in Baltimore City, and I live in DC, and the only thing I could think about was whether or not my family got the message I was coming out, and how was I gonna get out of Baltimore and get back home. It didn't even occur to me that I was actually free. That didn't set in until I got home with my family. And much like yourself, see, this is the devastating part of the prison industrial complex, because that's what they do. George Jackson say their goal is they try to take our individuality. The goal is to take our individuality. When we locked up and we incarcerated, you're no longer seen as an individual. You're a number. What 124403? That's my number, and that's what they call you by. When they say what's your number, they don't ask you what's your name. They say what's your number, and that's to take your individuality. But to close on this point, bro, you know, we applaud you for what you did thus far. We applaud you because of the way you came out, and much like other people in similar situations that have been exonerated. But you got the last word on this subject matter. What do you want to tell the Rattling the Bars audience, the Real News audience?
I want to say that prison should be abolished. I want to end it on that. Some people think this is a crazy idea. I say that most people are abolitionists, or they understand the abolitionist principles. A couple examples would be children are taken in this country all the time, from school, hospitals, immediately. When someone feels that a child is being harmed, they immediately move that child out of that situation, often not knowing what the outcome is going to be. But they say that right now, today, not tomorrow, not then, we're removing them because they're being harmed. Another example may be like if you had a loved one who was in an abusive relationship and you know it, most people would encourage them to exit that relationship immediately. Even if that person would ask you questions like, what do I do about money? What do I do for clothes? It really doesn't matter what they come up with. You'll tell them, we will figure it out. Well, it's a fact that people are being harmed in the criminal justice system. Briefly, we know that the criminal justice system treats people of color unfairly from the moment of contact to whatever the conclusion is, unfairly in harming them. Same thing with women, gays, lesbians, transgenders. We know that one's economic status impacts what kind of justice you so-called get. Rich people, affluent people often skirt those same things that less affluent, less wealthy people are severely punished for. Having said that, people are being harmed by the criminal justice system. Once I know I'm saying quickly, but these are much broader subjects. As you said, prison is the modern day form of slavery. It even says it in our Constitution, which I know you are aware of. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except whereas one has been convicted of a crime. So they put that exception in there. You know, they're saying we're going to abolish slavery, except the criminal justice system is a form of slavery. People are looked at as property. And one of the hallmarks of prison is rooting out anything of an individual nature. You know, everybody does the same thing at the same time. Everybody wears the same thing. Everything you do at the same time because you're not an individual. You know, so having said that, I believe that we need to look at ways that we can bring the prison system to an end immediately. Mm-hmm. One last thing, I have to say this too. Often people ask me, what do I think America would look like or neighborhoods would look like if everybody was released immediately? And I tell them that America in the world is in the business of abolishing things immediately. Iraq being an example. America went in and abolished an entire system, everything, police, courts, judges, everything, with the idea that they could put it back together, right? I'm not saying I'm in agreement of what they put back together, but that's an example of how something can be abolished and something could be put back in its place. Another example I use is South Africa. When the indigenous population was regaining control of the government, a lot of systems were immediately abolished. We did not hear about mad bloodshed in Iraq. We did not hear about mass murders and crime sprees in South Africa. You know, there are examples of how systems can be abolished. Something more along the line of being people-centered could be put in its place. So I would like more people to educate themselves about abolition and more people to get involved in how we can end harm immediately in this country and particularly in the criminal justice system.
And you have it, the real news about
yes, sir.
A man that's been exonerated. Lacino Hamilton was exonerated, wrongfully convicted. However, like the phoenix rising from the ashes, he rose. He raised his consciousness. Now he's an anti-capitalist, abolitionist, and a true example of what happens when a person goes to prison and not serve time, but let time serve him. Thank you, bro, for this enlightening conversation. And
thank you for having me, sir.
We look forward to seeing some of the remarkable things you'll be doing in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And in close, I want to encourage all our listeners and our viewers to continue to support Rattling the Bars and the Real News. You can learn how to do this by going to our website. With that, I'm Man Smooth to sign off with Eddie Conway.